Good morning. My name is Chris. I'm the Director of Web and Database Administration, which is a really interesting title because I'm a director of myself. I don't have a department. It's just me. But it sounds really good to call myself a director. And yeah, when I introduce myself, I can say I'm a director, and I don't have to tell people that I don't have a department. So we're going to go over a lot today, and this is going to go a little beyond just Charge Conference. We're going to also talk about clergy compensation, which is, of course, part of the Charge Conference. We're also going to talk about the church leaders, or what y'all used to refer to as LCLCL, which when I first started, I told them that I hated acronyms, and they told me that, well, you're in the wrong area because the Methodist Church uses lots of acronyms. So I've eliminated the acronym LCLCL, and we're calling it something else now. So we're making progress. Now, if at any time after you leave here, you have somebody who's not here, you want to rewatch this, we are recording it. So feel free to go to this site right here, and it also has this PowerPoint on there as well. I also understand the irony of the fact that I have printed out a bunch of papers, as I'm about to tell you that we're not going to do paper anymore with the conference. So I understand that. So just, if you're sarcastic like I am, just bear with me. Okay, just a quick little bit about myself. Like I said, I'm the Director of Web and Database Administration, but I really do everything IT related here at the conference. So I focus on vision and planning, making sure we have our technology up to date and using the latest things. But my main focus, what I love doing, is programming. And so I mostly program and custom write all of these things that we do. And then we do a lot of database. We have all of our different databases of the clergy, of the laity, of different things that we track here at the conference office. And so I do that. I've lived in North Carolina pretty much all my life. Actually, completely all my life. There was about a 3-month period where I lived in Chicago, but that ended very quickly. 3 months and I was out. So I've lived in North Carolina. I grew up in a small town, Thomasville, North Carolina, and moved to Charlotte to go to UNC Charlotte. And then I graduated from UNC Charlotte, never went home, which my parents hated. My mom's always asking, when are you going to return? And I graduated 7 years ago. Okay, so I graduated college 7 years ago, and she's still asking me, when are you going to come home? When are you moving back home? When are you moving back home? Also, been in the Methodist Church my entire life. When I was at UNC Charlotte, I went to the Methodist campus ministry there. That was the reason that I stayed into the Methodist Church, was that campus ministry there. And so I always bring that up because I think it's such an important part in the people that are there at UNC Charlotte. And all the different Methodist foundations that are at the different colleges, they play an important part to what we do. And then I worked for the campus ministry for a number of years, and then moved here about a year and a half ago, something like that. So I started here about a year ago. So what's new? What are we going to be talking about today? Why are we having this? The big thing is, everything is now completely online. As you remember, Charge Conference used to be all these PDFs. That's the second thing. When I started, I said, I absolutely have a passion for hating PDFs. I don't like them. We fill out the PDFs. Fillable PDFs don't work on some people's computers. Other people's, when it prints, it looks weird. My goal is to eliminate PDFs from the existence of this world. So we are completely moving online. Everything will be online. And what that means is there's no downloading. You don't have to download anything. There's no more uploading. You don't have to scan things in on weird scanning apps or anything like that to get it back onto the computer. There's no mailing things in. Everything is completely online, and when you hit submit and you're done, that's it, you're done. Now, the districts still have the ability to go in and approve it, both for the clergy compensation and all the Charge Conference forms. So they're still going to see it, and they get a notification when you fill it out. So that's our way of mailing it in now. But now we don't have to wait for the papers to come out, fill them out, send them back in. We don't have to do anything like that.
And I don't have to remove staples before I scan.
Yeah, right. Helping out Ravonda here. Yeah. We're also removing any type of confusing signature fields, and we'll talk about this. If you know, this has been a process over the course of a year. And at the beginning, when I first came in, there were a couple of districts who we did kind of like a hybrid program for this, where they had to actually like print some out and then sign it, scan it back in, and some of them had these weird like signature fields. We're going to go over how you're actually going to sign these things and what it means, but it's easy. It's no actually signing. It's just clicking a button and writing your name, and that's your signature. We'll talk about that. So if you've experienced any of the confusing signature fields before, rest assured we're not going to have those anymore. So why are we going online? What's the big deal about moving online? Well, besides my passion for hating PDFs and anything paper related, I just think it's a lot easier. I think the process will be a lot easier for you just to go online, fill it out, press a button, and you're done. You've sent it online, you're done. That's it. It's faster. And then the biggest thing, at least from our perspective in the conference, is that it's more historical. So our old database system did not track things as well as we would have liked. And so when you filled out all these PDFs, yes, we would upload those PDFs and send them in. We didn't have quick access to that data. If we wanted to pull out of churches, we had to go into our file system, pull out that church, look through the PDF, figure out which line we wanted, and grab it. Well, now as you fill out each field in these PDFs, it's going to go into our master database. And when it goes into our master database, that allows us to quickly grab as much information as we need. So we need churches who fit this criteria. Okay, that's easy. It's just a quick search. We need to reach out to these churches that do this, or you might reach out to me and say, hey, I'd like to know some other churches that match this criteria, so that way I can reach out to them and see how they're doing things. Well, that's a lot easier with this. And it also allows us to keep all of this stuff in a database. Now, as you know, anything tech related in the world of data privacy and things like that, there's some fear around where our data is going, how it's going, and is it safe, is it secure, what's happening. We use a system called Brick River, and I'm going to talk about Brick River in just a second. But we use a system called Brick River, which mostly caters to conferences. They also do some church work, but they tend to be a content management system that caters around United Methodist conferences. And they have everything from database management to an emailing system to website design. All of that's kind of bundled in and keeps all of our systems connected. That is ran on the cloud. It's ran up in Microsoft Azure, so it's handled by Azure. And what you need to know by that, all you need to know, is that it's backed up hourly, so we're not going to worry about losing our data. It's backed up in 2 different locations throughout the country, one on the West Coast, one on the East Coast. It's backed up hourly, and then after 30 days, it's backed up every day. On top of that, all of the data that is sent to the cloud is encrypted. So, as always, I'll be the IT guy and say that encryption is very hard to break. It's not unbreakable, but it is very hard to break. At the same time, hackers are mostly not focusing on churches. I mean, you know, they're going to care a lot more about the banks and things where they can get some money. They're not really after our data for the most part. On top of that, you should know that we do not keep any type of super sensitive information within our Brick River system. So anything like bank account numbers, anything like social security numbers, nothing like that we track, nothing like that is kept. It is kept in our financial software, which is hosted by us, and that is also encrypted, and that is only accessed by a couple of people. So I want you to feel safe and secure as you know that when you're transmitting this data, for the most part, as I can promise, at least as far as I can promise, that the information is safe, secure, and quickly accessible. Now, I will add just a little caveat as we go through this. When we get to the question and answer time at the very end, I am just the tech guy. I just kind of do what they tell me to do in terms of that. So if you have a question about a specific form as to why there are certain things that are tracked and things like that, I can't answer that question. Ravonda might be able to answer that question, but we may have to outsource it to somebody, the powers over our head, who actually decide that. So the questions, when we get to that time, would be great if it could mostly be focused on the tech side of things, how to actually do what we're doing to make it easier for everybody. When I started a year ago, we were on a homegrown system, and you remember that as the old WNCC admin site. That site was written on a code language called Cold Fusion, which you probably haven't heard because it was stopped production about 20 years ago and was still being used by our IT department to host everything. On top of that, it was ran by our in-house IT department. So let's say our IT department was to disappear, then there's no access in that. And that's what happened was we decided to move into a different direction. And so we released the IT department, and then I kind of took over, and the main focus was taking off-the-shelf things. And so our first, we were already using Brick River for our website. So we thought, why not go ahead and use Brick River for all of our database management software? So we spent a week's time in what should have taken 6 months to convert all of the everything over to Brick River a year ago. You probably remember this last year because everything was delayed by a few weeks to get everything out. Well, that was because I was told, okay, you're hired, here you go. You have a week to get everything transferred over. And so we worked really hard. I spent about a week in New Hampshire with the Brick River team, and we got most everything, and we've been building on it from there. But it's a process. It's something new, and it's something we are planning on sticking with for the time being, as long as I'm here. So we will do that. And then if I do disappear tomorrow, the good news is that somebody, the Brick River team, has access to the data. There's still things that we don't have access to because it was written in code that nobody understands anymore, and so it's lost. And so we may have lost some of that stuff forever. And so that shouldn't happen anymore. But that's probably way more than you needed to know kind of about me and about Brick River and all that. So let's just get started and talk about charge conference reporting. So we're going to focus on, this is kind of our agenda of how we're going to kind of go through things and what we're going to talk about. We're going to start with the dashboards. Most of you, I hope by now, are familiar with what the dashboard is, but if not, we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about what a form bite is. You're going to hear that language a lot as we go through forms, as we go through this charge conference season. We're going to talk about the checklist and what that's turned into now. We'll talk about church leaders, formerly LCLCL, so it's just church leaders now. We'll talk about clergy compensation and how that's changed just a little bit in the past couple of weeks to adhere to the new system and what that means for you guys in terms of signatures and things like that. We do have a couple of new forms that we have, and then we're going to just kind of go over the process of how to fill out a form anyways. And so you can kind of get a brief idea. And then we'll talk about how to submit at the very end to get it in for everything to be clear. I will apologize in the beginning. I am going to dumb everything down as much as possible, so I'm not insulting your intelligence. I just want to make sure that we cover everything from the very beginning and from the simplest thing, just so that way you can understand what we're doing and what you're and that. Now, if you have any questions after this, feel free. We're going to have a question and answer time to answer in here. But if you have any questions when you leave, like I said, I'm going to record this. You can rewatch it. But then you can reach out to your district administrator, and if they don't know the answer to it, they'll reach out to me. Like I said, I'm just by myself. And so it's kind of hard when I get 1,000 churches all on the same day asking me the same questions. So I send my information out to the district admins and say, you are our first defense. You stop it and say, this is who you need to talk to first to get the information. If they can't answer it, they reach out to me. And so that's the easiest way. They'll also respond a lot quicker. I receive close to 300 emails a day, and so I don't always get to all of those emails right away. So I don't want you to also feel like I'm ignoring you. So start with the district admin. So let's talk about the dashboard. Now, you're familiar with the old system being just kind of going on and logging in, and that's how it worked. Well, it's a little bit different now. We've separated these two into what we call the clergy dashboard and the church dashboard. They are two different things. If you are a clergy person and you're signing into the clergy dashboard, you're only going to see things that pertain to you as a clergy member. You're not going to see things that really pertain to your church. There's a separation that we placed in there for a reason. So when you go into your clergy dashboard, don't expect to see everything that you would see in your church dashboard. The church dashboard is the opposite. You're not going to see things that would pertain to your clergy. For the most part, compensation is in there, and we'll talk about that. But for the most part, you're getting things that have to do with the church. And we'll talk about like what types of information are between the two. There is only one login per church. And that was a big change from the old system to the new system, and a little frustrating even on my end, because I wish we could have multiple logins. But the way the Brick River system works is it only allows for one login per record. And each record, so one church would fit a record. So what that means is don't give out that username and password to people that you don't want to have a lot of access to everything. Because we also, within that login, everything is shown. So that means that goes from clergy compensation all the way down to church information, things like that. So if you're a clergy person and you give out your clergy username and password to your church administrator, things like that, just make sure that when you're doing that, you understand that now they have full access to your dashboard and profile. But I want you to think about these dashboards as hubs of information. This is where you will go to grab all of your information. Anything you need from your church year-to-date apportionments and remittance payments, to your benefits payments that are being paid by the church, to any type of forms that we ask you to fill out, anything like that can all be accessed through the dashboard. So we'll start with the clergy dashboard just briefly, and I'll kind of go over kind of what's inside the clergy dashboard. This is kind of what it looks like. The screen's actually pretty large, so it actually is missing up in the top up here. You'll have like your name and different things like that. But the menu is over here to the left, and then your first page that you go to has just a bunch of news and things that we post pretty regularly. So you should be logging into your dashboard fairly regularly, because the news that is found on here isn't the news that we place all over the website. Because not always do we want to post on our front page things like clergy compensation report ready for July 1 appointment changes, because someone who's visiting our page to find out where churches are and things like that doesn't necessarily need to see that information. So they're not always, but for the most part, the news is separated. So you should be logging into your dashboard pretty regularly to see what news and things we're pushing out as well. All your menu items are, like I said, on the left, different things, and we're going to go through each of those to kind of talk about different things that are on there. This is the link that you would go to get to your dashboard. It says People Dashboard for a reason, because eventually we're going to open this up to include laity, and especially our lay servant members. And so they're going to also kind of go to this. I did not want to make a third dashboard and call it lay dashboard. It just was going to confuse everything. So it does say People Dashboard as the short URL. And in the clergy dashboard, you're going to find things like your clergy compensation, where you fill out your clergy compensation report. You're going to find contact information. Here's a big one, advanced clergy search. So if you go to the main website, you type in clergy, you can find out a little bit of information, where their church is, things like that. But if you log into the dashboard and go to advanced clergy search, it gives a lot more information, where they went to school, a lot more contact information, because we don't want our clergy's contact information just all over the website for anybody to kind of grab. But we do want to allow other members of churches that have this login, and for clergy, especially fellow clergy, to be able to reach out and say, hey, I needed to contact you. So that type of information would be found there. And we get that request a lot. Hey, I used to could find a lot of information. Where is it now about our different clergy? It's in the advanced clergy search. It also includes our history and historical information, where you've been in the past, and where and information related to the church that you were at the moment when you filled out your end of year statistical reports. The church dashboard, as you see on the menu right here, has a lot more information. And this is probably the most pertinent to this group here and what you're kind of will be needing to do. And it has a lot of information that we have, from things like submittable forms. We'll talk about that in detail in just a minute. But submittable forms are where you go to find all of your forms that we're requiring you to fill out. This is where you'll go. Remittance payment details, benefit payment details, those are uploaded every night. And so you can generally, as soon as they enter them in the system, the next day you will find that information in there. Remittance information is uploaded hourly, though. So as Gloria in there is entering them in the system, every hour that is updated and up to date on the system. You can find our 2018 and 2019 apportionments, year-to-date remittances. 2020 will be there really soon. I had them all posted yesterday, and then Mark sent me an email and said, hey, we forgot to take out the church starts. And so I've got to go back in and do that. But I would expect 2020 apportionment information to be there either by the end of the day today or at least by tomorrow. So you'll have that information. The advanced clergy search is in there. And then there's a bunch of different things related to clergy compensation for all the clergy that is appointed to your church. Church leaders, church history, your church history profile from your statistical reports.
Chris, that's a good thing to point out is that the difference on the church dashboard clergy compensation and the clergy dashboard clergy compensation is you can only access yours. So if you log in on clergy, you can't see Wes's. If you log in through the church dashboard and click on that, you can see every single person's compensation level. That would be beneficial for you.
Right. Yeah. So that's a good point. So, like I said, think of the clergy dashboard as your individual dashboard only for you. You're only going to find information that relates to you. The church dashboard will for the most part only relate to the church, but in terms of clergy compensation, it will list everybody that's appointed. Now that even includes a couple of people who don't necessarily have to fill out a clergy comp form every year. There wasn't a way for us to separate those two, so you just know which ones you have to fill out. And I think I covered most of that already, but the link to that, the short link, is just dashboard. And so that includes a lot of different information. The church and clergy dashboards are very important. We're going to continue adding to those. And like I said, that is your hub of information. That should be where you always start when you're looking for something. Start there and see if you can find it in there. And if not, then maybe we need to add it. So send us an email and let us know. But the dashboards, for the most part, is where all the information is going to be. So I know I'm throwing a lot of information at you all at once, but let's go straight into what a form bite is. A form bite is basically a form invitation. And so what a form bite really is it's a collection of forms all together. And then it creates the ability to fill some out at some point, finish some. Our Brick River system doesn't allow, for the most part, saving of forms halfway through, which is frustrating for people. So when you go through the form bite system, you are allowed to save them halfway through. And so we'll talk about exactly how to go through the form bite to get to the process to be able to save them. So that way you don't have to sit there in one sitting and fill out the entire thing and then get frustrated when you get to the very end, don't know something and can't hit save. I know that is frustrating. And unfortunately, that is not something we have control over. That's a Brick River thing that every year I send him every week, really, I send him an email. Hey, this is a feature we would really like to have. But we can do saves when you do it through a form bite. It also keeps the collection of forms together, so that way you don't have to keep up with, have I filled out this form or not? It'll tell you. And we'll see a picture of it in just a second where it goes through and says, here's the forms you filled out, here's the ones you completed, and here's the ones that still haven't been filled out. And then when you go to officially submit the form and you're done, when you click submit, if there are any errors on any of the other forms, it will highlight those and will not let you submit it until those errors are fixed. That's huge for us, especially because it can be frustrating when we get a packet of information and we go, oh, you filled this out wrong, or oh, you did this wrong, or oh, you left out this entire section. And then we have to call you and get you to fill it out again. And that's just frustrating for both parties because maybe you just happened to glance over it and forgot about it. And so this way, it'll force you to fill out every bit of information right away before you can submit the whole thing. So this is just a picture. I debated whether to include this because you're actually never going to see this picture, but I wanted to kind of give you an example of what a form bite really is. And this is an example of our charge conference forms that we've been using and testing and playing with. And you can kind of see we divide them up. Now, obviously for charge conference, we are not including any optional or multi-optional forms. We'll talk about that in a second because there is obviously the report of the parsonage is kind of an optional form, but we are making, I'll talk about that in a minute. I don't want to go off topic. So basically a form bite will collect all of the forms, keep them together. Now also, just so you know, this is helping our district admins out a lot too because they're now going to be able to see everybody's status down here, what forms they've already started and haven't started, when they last viewed it, when they submitted it and when they actually did it. So that way, if it's the night before, and we still have some people who haven't even viewed their forms, we can send out an email and say, hey, by the way, don't forget, these are due tonight. At the same time, this really allows you to procrastinate just a little bit. Now, Ravonda does not want me to say this, but you don't have to mail these in and print them out. So if you want to wait till the very night before they're due and fill them all out, that's perfectly fine, because this system allows you to do that. Ravonda is telling me not to encourage that. Right. So, yeah, this is just basically, and you probably have already noticed the new form that we're adding. It's the youth 9th through 12th grade, but that's the only other kind of new form that we're adding. We're going to talk into detail about that one.
I'm going to step out when you start talking about that.
No, I need you to stand here because I need somebody to throw things at. So, not me. So, and just no, this is why I made that comment at the very beginning. I'm just the person who does what they tell me to do. Ravonda also, so this is a new form, but it's an interesting one. So anyways, we're going to go to talk about when you're ready to fill out charge conference forms. Okay, so you've logged into your church dashboard and you're ready to go. We do encourage you to fill out these charge conference forms, obviously, before your charge conference is actually held, and I'll show you how you can print them out for yourself. Now, again, that's just printing out for you and your records. Nothing needs to be sent to us. Nothing needs to be mailed in. Nothing needs to be uploaded and downloading. If you print, it's just in case you go to church and you don't want to take your laptop with you. You want to make copies for other people so they can see the different reports. But okay, so you go into your church dashboard and you're going to go up here to submittable forms, charge conference profiles, etc. It's at the very top. I put it at the very top for that reason. And again, this is where you're going to see everything that we require from you. So church profiles are going to be there, assessments are going to be there, supplemental forms. As we start adding even more reports that we do already in paper form, we're converting those over to be in this online system. So everything you have to fill out is going to go through this submittable forms section. Now, when you go here, you're going to see a list of submittable forms and whether you've submitted them or not. It doesn't say whether you started them or not, though. It just says whether you've actually submitted them. Now, it's not in this picture because I didn't assign it to this particular church that I was already in, but if the charge conference forms were there, it would just be next in line and say 2019 charge conference forms. All you have to do is click that link. As soon as you click that link, it's going to lead you to this page. And this page is what you see for your charge conference forms. Now, I've only got one form in here because this is just a test. But what you're going to actually see is all of the forms listed one by one. And they're each going to say, start this form. And so it's as simple as having them all right there. It'll tell you whether you've started. Once you start this form, and I'll show you the next picture in a second about what it's going to look like at different times, but it kind of gives you whether you've submitted it already, whether you have started to fill it out and not finished it, different things like that. It'll also have these tags required. Now, again, we're requiring them all this year just so that way we have access to all of that. And we figure that if we make something optional, more of the people who are supposed to fill them out are not going to actually fill them out. So we just decided we're going to make every single one required. And so this is what you see. So church dashboard, submittable forms, and then as soon as you click, you will click start this form when you're ready to fill out that form. Now let's talk about kind of some of these new forms. What is it going to look like when you fill these out? What is it going to, so when you click Start Form, what are you going to see? Here's an example of one. This is the Charge Conference Reports Checklist, which tells you a kind of a list of what all you know you have to do. We are including this one this year. It is a little bit redundant, I recognize, because you're also filling it out on the other end as well, and really it's just a yes or no. But we decided to include this just to kind of help with the process of transitioning over, because most of you are used to filling out a checklist and going one through one of filling everything out. This has, you fill out the top, which is the person filling out the form, and then you just go through each one and check that you have completed them, yes or no. The local leadership, Obviously, there's no form to fill out, but once I get to local leadership, I'll show you what you have to do to actually get to a point that shows us that you've completed those. Clergy compensation is also one that you don't have to actually turn in a paper. There's no like downloading it and putting it into the church conference forms, because that directly manipulates our database. So as soon as you hit submit, it automatically updates the database for us. So you just have to mark that you've completed it. Nothing that you have to add to the church conference forms. And then you'll just go through and basically, the reason I said this is easy is because basically this is just a form. It's just a simple form that you would normally fill out with Google Forms or Jot Form or any other that people might send you. It's as simple as that. It's filling out text fields, hitting yes or no's, things, different things like that. There's really no uploading. There was one form that at the moment has an upload, but I'm talking to Amy about why we needed that and removing that. So that way there won't be any confusion. It's just filling it out as you go. Here's another example of one, the agenda and minutes for the church conference. Now the way our form system works, it doesn't look the greatest, but it's it's got an intuitive process. It's just one after the other. So you don't have to worry about a text field being to the side over here that you forget. It's just one after the other. It makes it look really ugly, I'll admit, because this would look a lot nicer if I could make the first name a little shorter, move the last name, yada, yada, yada. But at least you know that you're just going to go one after the other. Now, as you probably know, for the most part, asterisk beside it means it's required. Now, when you go to the very bottom, it's going to say submit. Now, since you're in the form bind, and this is important but a little confusing, I'll admit, is, let me go back to here. If you go through this system, so you actually go through the form by system and click start this form or edit this form, and you get to the form and you go to the very bottom and hit submit, it will allow you to submit it without all the required fields being filled out. Now, I tell you that because at the very top, it's in your browser. You can copy that URL and send it to somebody to fill out. However, if you do that, it doesn't connect it to your form by system, and it won't allow you to fill out non-required fields. So my recommendation for you is to never send that URL out to anybody. Always go through the dashboard, click edit this form or start this form if you haven't started, and fill it out through there. Okay, so we were talking about submission. So when you're ready to submit the end of the form, you're done. Again, just briefly, if you need to print it out for your records, you're keeping your church records, or you want to print it out or just pass out at the church conference, you can also have that. Now, something interesting also to note. Yes, ma'am.
Can we get to that beforehand? We still work on that as a group collectively with paper. Like, you know, we pass it office to office as admin. Can we print that before we start? Or is that a function we get to after we finish?
Yeah, I think technically you can, because if you can save the form as since you don't have all the required fields, I would just go in and then maybe type in A or something in the name, click submit. It'll give you this option to print it. You can also technically print the form. I don't recommend printing it directly from the actual, like where you actually fill things out. It doesn't look good. So maybe fill out something, submit it. You'll get to this, then you can print it out and fill out each thing. That would be a good idea for that.
Chris, I have a question. Is there a save button?
So it's not called save. It'll say submit, and that throws a lot of people off. But it technically is submitting the form. But if it's through the form by system, it will allow you to save it or submit it before all the required fields are in there.
So when you hit submit, is it being submitted?
It is technically, no, Rhonda will not see it. It's being submitted to our database.
Okay.
But you can then go in and make changes and then submit it again. It's not like, and you're able to click edit this form until you do the final submission.
Okay.
So then you can go in and make as many changes as you want until the day that it's due for you to finally
And there's
submit.
the final submission.
Yes, and we're going to get to that. Yep. These are the individual reports, each one, and then you can print them out for that. I will also say, just briefly, if you go back to your submittable forms in the church dashboard, they're going to stay there for years and years and years. I mean, eventually we'll probably limit how many we show, but all those forms are there. So then, and that's going to be for all statistical supplement, to the profiles. Everything's going to be there. So if in a couple of years you're like, what did I put on this church conference form 3 years ago? You can go in, click that, and see what you put in 3 years ago. So it will be there if you need that. That information is an option. Okay, as you fill out and finish each form, you're going to see kind of this. This is the bottom of what I just showed you. So the top is going to show you that print, and then the bottom of this is going to say this. I need to stress this because a lot of people think that when they fill out each individual form, then they think that that's all they have to do and that's the end. That's not the end, and that's why Brick River added this huge green button that doesn't actually look like a button, so people don't know that it's a button. But it is actually a button that says, tell us you're done or view more forms. So when you fill out your form and you're done with that form, you click this green button and it takes you back to that form invite, which has each of the forms. If you're completely done, I'll show you at the very bottom where you'll go to finally submit your, or officially submit. But until you officially submit, it's not submitted. It's just you filled out and saved that form. Now, when you're done, when you fill out each form, it's going to change a little bit. Instead of saying start this form, it's going to say edit this form or review and print. Review and print just brings up that condensed and other print area I was telling you about. But it'll say that you've completed it, and it will allow you to go in and make edits and finish and change things that you want. Now, this is important. Make sure that before you do the ready for submission, final submission, that you are completely done. Because once you completely submit the form and officially submit it, it will not allow you to go back in and make changes to the forms after that point. So make sure all of your forms are the way you want them until. Now, if you go in and you submit it and you're like, oh, we need to make a change, call your district administrator, they can go in and unsubmit it so you can make a change. So it's not the end of the world, but it just try to make sure you're done before you actually officially submit. Now, this blue box will not appear until you've filled out each of the required forms. So before, it's just going to say, at the bottom, it'll be a gray box that says status started, and that's it. So until you've officially filled out each form and are complete with all of them, now I will say that it's going to go through each form, and regardless of whether you've actually filled out every field in that form, if you've submitted it, then it's going to count it as a submission. And so then it'll count it as done. Now, when you go to officially submit my form, which is where you type in your name that you're submitting and hit that officially submit, it goes through each form individually and checks to make sure you have all the required fields filled out. If you do not, it doesn't let you submit it. It throws up an error message. And then over here to the right, it tells you exactly which line and field that was not filled out. So then you don't have to go back in and click it and like, okay, which one did I not fill out? It'll tell you which one you didn't fill out. But you do have to go through, but it'll kind of give you that. So don't forget to it's good to do a final check and go through each of your forms just to make sure before you hit that final submit so you're not surprised with all these red flashing lights that say, hey, this is an issue. Now, yes?
So what about all the signatures that were always required for all these different forms?
Yes, and I'm just now noticing I did not take a picture of the new signature. So I did for a clergy comp, but I forgot for the form. So just when you write this down, I'll include it, and then I'll maybe be able to pull it up in a minute. So we changed the submission of the signature field. So Brick River has a sign where you kind of drag your mouse around, but it's confusing, annoying, and nobody likes it, including myself. And so what we've done is we've created a system. If you remember when you filled out your statistical in your reports, at the very bottom, there were 3 submission areas. And what it said was you clicked it by saying, I am attesting that the information above is correct to the best of my knowledge. And so like if one was for the pastor, the next one was for the treasurer, different people, whoever has to fill. And so they click that button and then you type in their name. So that is what we're replacing signature fields with. A button that says they're attesting that the information is above, and then their name in there. Now, you can go through and just click it and type in the names. But if later down the road, if the treasurer or somebody comes up and says, I don't know about this form, and we go, well, no, you technically said that you're attesting. That's what we're using as our reference to say, no, you click this counts as your signature. It is the same as a digital signature. We pulled a lot of that from some different conferences. The language that we're using pulled from a lot of different conferences in our legal departments to make sure that the language in there counts as a digital signature. And so it is the exact same as signing, but it is clicking a button and then typing the name of the person.
So could we send them like the URL of the finished form, they could review it?
Yes.
And we can type it
Correct.
in?
Yes, that's probably the preferred way to do it. Yes. Yeah, you can send that URL. You could also, when you do the print condensed, you could save it as a PDF or something and just send them the PDF. It really, whatever works for the people you're sending it to. Okay, so when you're done, when you click submitted by, you fill that in, you click it, everything's good. It's going to say officially submitted. Good job. And that's it. That's all you have to do. There's nothing else. There's no more printing and sending it in. You're done. All you have to do at that point, it will change it. You can still access this page. It'll just remove this edit this form, and it'll just have review print. So you can go back in and look at them later to print out or whatever, but you will no longer be able to make any edits. Now, it will say at the bottom, it will say not approved. It'll say submitted, but not approved. And what that means is then, and they get a notification, so there's no need for you to then reach out and say, hey, we've done this. Your district administrator, after your church conference, y'all voted on, approved everything, and no other changes need to be made. You can go in, and they will go in, look at them, and if they're confirming that everything looks correct and nothing needs to be changed, they'll approve it. And once they approve it, that's it.
So with 200 churches, please don't think that when you have submitted it and your church conference is over, that I'm going to click on that button that next day, because it ain't going to happen. It'll happen before the end of the year.
But all you need to really worry about is getting it officially submitted. And then as long as it says submitted, then that's good. You're good to go.
And it submits them all at once.
Correct.
That
Yes.
is that last
That's correct. Yep. Yes.
I know a lot of us have done this before,
Mhm.
but there's a few people that don't even know what a charge conference is. And when you go to something, why do they have it? This kind of thing. So can you explain?
Yeah, I'm probably not the best person to explain that. So maybe when Ravonda comes back in, I'll let her explain why we need that. Because I agree, that is probably a great thing. I'm just probably not the best person. I would butcher it just a little bit. So
And then forms that we had to send in before, like insurance and say sanctuary, and then we wanted a whole brochure release. Those aren't going to be required anymore.
So the state sanctuaries is still in there from what? Let me make sure before I tell you this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So every form that was already on your old checklist of things you had to send in are on this list now. The state sanctuaries report was just updated by Pavla, so she just filled it. What we're trying to do is, you were talking about sending in a brochure and things like that. We're trying to avoid you having to actually scan or upload anything. So I can't specifically say for each form, but I do know that we're trying to simplify that and make it to where either it's fill out or you don't have to do that part.
Because I think like when we fund balance, those would have like insurance.
Yeah, I'm not entirely, so I'll have to double check on that. I can check it while we're eating lunch. But I know they did something specific to that one to make it work for the online form. So I'll get back to you on that one. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, all that same thing with the fund balance report, we usually have been uploading or attaching somehow the audit. Is that no longer the annual audit?
Okay, let me check on that one as well. Like I said, I don't know. We actually had Amy and her department actually build out the forms based on what they wanted to require in terms of each form. So I may have to check that particular form to find out. Maybe we can bring those up during lunch or something and look at them quickly to make sure and see.
If there's no parsonage.
Yeah,
And
so
it's a
we
required
were
form.
smart on that. We made it a required form so people wouldn't just skip it. But at the very top, if you don't have a parsonage, you just click I don't have a parsonage, type in your name and submit it. Yeah.
Can I bring my laptop or something?
Yeah, we're going to go through it. That's what we were just talking about. So I'm going to answer this question, and then somebody asked the question. There's a few people in here who don't necessarily know what church conference is and why it's required, things like that. And I thought you would be the best to explain that.
It's not to the bishop about that, but the church conference has always been required. Sam, Can you address that?
Mhm.
Why does the United Methodist Church require an annual charge conference? What is it?
The charge conference is a conference that happens in the local church. And it's where the local church is connected to the district and to the general church. It's also the place where pastor's compensation is set. And it's also the meeting in which the church is making its claims for the upcoming. It's getting all your budgets and everything together and making sure that you are in alignment with your mission and your vision. So there's a local meeting that happens once a year in the local church or the charge, because the charge can be more than one local church. And so it's where pastors' compensation, officers elected, and I'm trying to think, in apportionments. It used to be that we accepted apportionments, but no longer do we accept apportionments. We receive the apportionments. And the apportionments is how we participate in the life of the Joan Church, the district church, and in our local community.
It's not, you can have it at your church itself, right?
You can have it at your church, or if you're on a charge with more than one church, it happens at one of those churches that make up that charge.
So it's a meeting.
It's a meeting.
That has to be presided over by an elder of the church.
Thank you, Rwanda. I didn't know that.
Yes, ma'am.
So my question is, back where you have the medical forms and then we're dealing with charge conference forms right now. Is there a deadline date beside each form? So when we go in there, if somebody is new, they know that this form needs to be in by this particular time?
No, there is not, but that's a great idea. It's an easy thing we can add. Yeah, I think right now it just says the date that you actually submit. Now, when you're actually click on the form by, it will tell you when it's due, but that's not a bad idea to make a separate section that just says this form was submitted on this day and it's required on this day. So, yeah, that's a good idea. Yes. Yeah.
Chris, and it's probably me and my trying to be modern and maybe rebelling against it. How can, for example, there is a report that needs to be completed by the chair of the trustees, the chair of the finance committee. Okay, how can I make sure that my chairpersons are completing the information and that my administrative assistant does not have to do the work that they are supposed to be doing? How can I make sure, how can I get the information from them so that all that my administrative assistant has to do is input the information versus complete the entire form?
Yes, so it'll probably be different per church, but a couple of ideas I have right off the top of my head is, well, first of all, this is probably the least preferred option. Is like, I forget, somebody over here was mentioning printing it off first and then writing it in. I'm not a fan of that one because then somebody would have to actually go and type it in. So that's an option though, is you can print the form out and have them fill it out by hand, but I don't really recommend that one. The other way is you could have them fill it out as if you did not want to give them access to all of the forms and you just wanted them to have access to that one form, you could copy the kind of each question. They fill it out as a Word document and then you copy and paste it over. That's also an option. The preferred way, though, is when we send out the form bite, you will actually receive an email with this form bite link in there. It'll say form bite link at the bottom. And when you click that, it bypasses the church dashboard and goes straight to the form bite. What you could do then, but you would have to be okay with the fact that they would see other forms as well, is that you could send that form bite link to that chairperson. They could click the link, fill out the form that they want, hit submit, and they're done. Yep, perfect.
Chris, you asked Rhonda about the fund balance. You always determine the audit.
Yes.
So how do you do that?
Yeah, I think we're gonna look at that one during lunch because I'm not sure what they decided on that one. because I know they've changed a lot to make them online. So
This will be a learning curve for me too, then, so we'll look at that together.
So I did lie, apparently. I thought it did say not approved at the bottom. It'll just say submitted, and then it actually changes when they do approve, and it'll change to your progress approved on this date. So
Do we still have to submit the clergy compensation form ahead of time? For district approval?
So, your compensation is going to have to be approved and voted on before you even have the church conference. You do not have to turn anything into me. What we would like to look at it prior to. So, hopefully you're going to have it completed online prior to your church conference date.
Okay, so let's talk about church leadership just a little bit. And Ravonda's going to laugh at me because when I was making this and deciding this, I was like, I'm not going to have 2 hours worth of stuff.
Right.
And now I'm going to be pushing it. So I'm going to be pushing it. Okay, so let's talk about church leadership real fast. Again, it's used to be called LCLCL. This tracks all of your church leadership. We talked a little bit about privacy and security already, and so I'll just briefly talk about that in the sense of, for the most part, again, your church should already be doing this when you collect their information from the start, is knowing that, getting their permission that it might be passed out to someone else, meaning you're going to give it to us. And so what we do with that is there's a few things we do with that information. It's really twofold. First of all, we never give it to a group that is not on an approved list. And so what I mean by approved list means that the bishop's office has approved it, meaning they are a close organization that works closely with the Western North Carolina Conference on a regular basis. So if some just random group calls me and says, hey, we would love all your pastor's information, or we'd love all your church secretary's information, we don't ever give out that information to anybody whatsoever. On top of that, we definitely don't give out any type of personal information. So if someone calls me and says, hey, I would love the mailing addresses of all of the church youth contact, we say, okay, we'll give you, if they're an approved group that like say the campus, I'm just going to use campus ministries, had asked for that information, we say, okay, sure, we'll send you that information. But what I tend to do is I will put their first and last name and then put the church's mailing address down. So that way we're not giving out any type of real personal information. I want you to feel secure in that, knowing that we are definitely tightening that down, making sure that information is not just given out freely, because we're trusting that information is given to us, and so we don't want to abuse that information. At the same time, you do need to know that we do give out that information if they are an approved group. So, and I keep using this word approved group, and I'll give you some examples. The campus ministries are approved groups. Obviously, all of our retirement centers are approved groups. Some of the groups that are semi-connected, like they don't necessarily have a staff member on staff, but they are a part of the Western North Carolina Conference, they can request information. At the same time, I am very cautious about what I hand out because nobody wants 300 emails per day. So we always start with, okay, well, why don't you put it in our e-news first? Do you really need this information? So what they're required to do is send a letter to us telling us exactly what they're doing, when they're doing that for that mailing list or whatever, and then we have to approve it before it can go out. So I just say all that because I know that sometimes, we were talking about minors already. Same thing goes for other people as well. We don't want to just hand out data freely, and we want to make sure that the data that we do have, we're using it safely. Now, I'm going to talk about this in brief detail in a minute, but I want to go ahead and say, just to get it in your head, is that end dates on when you're filling out church leaders are not required, and we actually prefer you not put an end date down. And we're going to talk about that. I'm going to show you a specific example of that, but we prefer you not put an end date if you don't know if the person's going to be in that position. So if an example is, let's say your church historian has been the church historian for the last 30 years. They're probably not going to be they're probably going to be the historian another year too. So instead of you having to go in and change the start and end date every year, just remove the end date, and that way they'll just remain an active member. And I'll show you all this, but just so that way kind of keep it in your head knowledge. Don't put an end date unless you specifically know that, okay, this person is only serving a 1-year term and they will be done no matter what, December 31st. Yes, sir.
How does that apply to the committees that the discipline said you're to have classes?
Yeah, so again, if you know that they're going to end, you can put it as many years out as you want. So if you know that they're going to serve a 3-year term, you can put an end date, but put it 3 years in advance. Don't put it. I think the idea is if you don't know when they're going to end, don't worry about putting an end date. If you know that they're going to serve a 5-year term or a 3-year term, go ahead and put the end date in there, but don't put it until they're actually ending.
Right. And in the church leader list, the only things that you have to enter are the chair people. So it's not requiring you to put in each.
That's right. It is just the chair. Yeah. It's actually very similar to how we used to do it in the old system as well. Same thing with start dates. I'm going to talk about that. Is every year you don't have to go in and create a new record every year. We're going to go through this process really briefly, but just kind of keep it up to date and in your head. Multiple start years. You don't have to, like, if this person has been in the position for 30 years and they're not going anywhere, you don't have to create a new assignment for that year. The old system was a very much a 1-year type system. You kind of had to, but it was based on this. It started January 1st, ended December 31st. But our current system is more of a dynamic database, meaning it keeps the information from the very beginning of when they started to the end. And if there's no end date, then that means that they are, when we're doing our queries, we'll say either end this time or no end date. That's how we pull that information. So really, it's just to help you guys out for keeping track of everything. Plus, it removes duplicates within the system. Because if you create a record every single year of one person who's serving the exact same position, and you put 2018 to 2018, then 2019 to 2019, and it just creates so many duplicates. It's much easier just to keep that end date empty and just move it from year to year. We'll talk about this. Yes, ma'am.
So for people in classes, do I understand that we only include the chair's name, we don't have to include the other?
You only have to submit the chair to me. Y'all track it on y'all's end, who's rotating. But for us.
So on that form,
Mhm.
we only need the chair.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
So my question is, you say once we submit it to, and you can't get it back, what if in the mid-year someone resigns their position and we have to put someone else in, and what do we do then?
Okay, so church leaders is actually a little bit different than the form bite system. So church leaders is actually a separate part of the website. Because I'm going to get ready to show you that. That one you can make changes anytime. There's only one time a year we lock that down, and it's right before annual conference. So that way you can't go in and add a new lay person, and we don't have a name tag and type things. But you can edit that pretty much all year long. Yep. The only part you have to do in the church conference form is just put, hey, I submitted this, and I click I am done. So that way we just know you updated it. So, but you'll be
And you talk about, and I guess we'll do this when you go through and actually do it, the required positions.
Yes, we're going to talk about that. Yep. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we are going to talk about church leaders. If you, this is a snapshot, so to the left you'll see that menu. So if you want to access this, it's near the bottom actually, and it's just called church leaders. And so you'll click that, and it's going to lead you to this page. It's going to lead you to this page, and it's going to have all your current assignments in there. Now, as you can see, this person has all of the end dates already in there. So this is kind of what we're hoping to avoid. So, but let's just briefly go over what you're seeing here. Now, again, this is in the church dashboard, church leaders section. You click that, you see this. And there's multiple things that you can do. If you need to edit an assignment. Now, what that means is this person has finally come to you and said, okay, after 31 years, I don't want to be the church historian anymore. I'm done. And I'm done this day. But what you want to do then is click edit assignment. And then, the next, actually, let me just go to the next page so I can show you. It's going to open up this page right here. Then what you can do is put their end date as the date they told you that they're resigning from that position. Now, what it will then do is over here, it will keep it as the end date. And if they're still active, then it'll still show them. But the day that their end date is, it will no longer show them as your church leader anymore. So what you then want to do is add a new person who's going to take over that position. So it's kind of a two-step process when it comes to removing someone and changing them. There are required positions, and now this is, you can see this in the little on the page, but there's a bunch of different ones that we do require you to actually fill out. These are ones we definitely need you to have updated at all times. And so what you have to do is when you, at the end of for church conference, when you filled out all of your church leaders and you're like, okay, this is the most up-to-date for now that I know of, you're going to click this blue button up here at the top. And it says, I am done. If you don't have one of these required positions in here, it's going to say, nope, you're not done. You need to go back in and do something else. You're missing a position. If you've got all of these positions in there, then you click I am done, and it will update and say, it'll turn green and say, okay, it's good. And then it says you last told us on this date. Now, this is important because on the church conference form, that checklist I showed you, that were the yes or no, down there is a spot, and it's a required field that says you have to tell us what date is in here. So that way you can update and let us know what day you last updated it. Now, if you go in and everything's good and nothing's changed, just hit the blue button and you're good. It'll turn green and you take the date down, write it in your form, and then you're good to go.
You can keep making changes.
Yes, this is something that's open all year long. We just at least want you to at least look at it once a year. So that's why we require it around church conference time. We at least need you to look at it once a year because we don't want it to be 10 years outdated. Yeah. So let's say we're just going to go back to this example of the church historian leaving. And so there's the two steps that I told you about. The first step is you need to go in, edit assignment, remove their assignment. And so you'll go put the end date in there, and then as them stopping. Then what you need to do is you need to click this green button, go back out and save it, and it'll bring you back to this page. Then you need to click Add New Assignment, and this is adding a new person to your assignment list.
That's the question.
Yes.
That has personal data there as well. We need to get their permission before we do that.
We always require that. Every time that we add a leader, that information has been required. So my guess is if they're going to agree to serve as the chairperson, then they're paying them with that information.
Yeah, that's kind of one of those things. That's another one of those things. This is just be in your head to do every time you're collecting information. I mean, they're trusting you with their information, so you need to tell them ahead of time as you're collecting it from the beginning that, hey, we're getting your information. So that should just already be ingrained into what you're doing regularly, especially in today's age.
And the treasurer, the things that we require, for instance, the treasurer, that's who is in communication and gets the pension bills and the insurance bills, and we need their contact information as well. In particular, the staff parish relations chairperson. That all of these, it's a connected system, so we have to have that communication on them.
Yes, ma'am.
One of the required positions is church secretary. Are you talking about the person that's hired in the office or the church the church charge conference?
The church secretary is who
is the appointed person, not the staff.
But that person
Yes.
is not elected, that person's hired.
She's the.
It's a really good,
It's a good question.
that is a really good question. So I would prefer to have you guys, because I communicate with y'all and y'all push out the information to the churches. But as far as who the church conference secretary is,
Well, they call that recording secretary.
But they only
so
serve
that's just like they only serve the one time a year. That's the elected
during
person
yeah, they
for
serve during
that
the-
charge conference.
Right.
So we're gonna go with y'all, the church secretaries.
What if the church doesn't
Not-
have a church secretary? What
Then you,
it says it's required.
yeah, so then do you serve as your church secretary?
Yes.
Then you are gonna get my feelings.
Thank you.
So anytime.
Veronica, can you explain the difference between the finance secretary and the treasurer for the church?
Sam. Or Tony Rick, either one.
The financial secretary is the one who keeps a record of the giving and gives out the yearly report. It may also be that the financial secretary is doing something as relates to the offering, maybe in charge of counting the offering, or maybe in charge of paying the bills. Depends on how the church financial system is set up. There should be a division of tasks that the treasurer and financial secretary, one of them is receiving the fund, the other one is disbursing the fund. So it depends on what the church is saying the responsibility of the financial secretary is. But one of the duties of the financial secretary is to keep a record of the giving and to give out quarterly and yearly statements to the members.
If I could just state, so we went through a refinance in our mortgage, and
Yes.
we were required to have the church secretary be assigned church secretary to sign those documents. It could not be me as a business manager. It could not be any employee. It had to be the appointed church secretary, which is then the church conference secretary in the mind of the trustees chair is the owner
Yeah.
of the business, or if you're incorporated.
So to me, that's just two different things. You know, if the church secretary is not available at church conference, then they elect someone to serve as the church conference secretary at the church conference.
Oh, okay, but we always have our church secretary at that, okay, all right.
All right, so the adding a new assignment is a little bit different than what we just saw here. So this is just editing assignment. It's already going to have the people at the top, the person it's assigned to. Now, this is important. If the person changes, this is not the area where you add the new person. So when you go to edit assignment, you're just editing that person's assignment. So don't, and there's actually no way we took it away. There used to be a way where you can change the people at the top. We just made that read only, so that way you didn't change it and put a different person in there, because we want different records for different people. So when you're changing an assignment, this person's leaving, you've added an end date. Then you click save, it's taken you back to here. Now you're going to add new assignment, which will take you to this page. The first part is just the beginning. You're not going to see all of it at first, but you're going to see this part, which is chair of programming council, which is just something I picked. So there's a bunch of different positions there. Select the one you're wanting to fill. And what it's going to do is pull up everybody in your contact list. And so, and I'll show you where the contact list is in just a second, because it's also in the church dashboard. But it's going to bring up everybody in your contact list. If you see somebody, meaning this person served multiple positions for multiple years, maybe they're just switching positions, then you can just go ahead and select them, and we can add Richard. You just pick this person, and it'll assign them to that position and set the start date to that date that they're starting. You can then go in there and change the start date to whatever date you need it to start. If they're not going to start for the next year or whatever. If they're not your contact, they're someone new, you've convinced someone else to serve on your committee, and this person's new, and you need to add them. What you'll do is down here, you can't find the person in your church, and it's down here at the very bottom, enter their name, and then what it's going to do is it's going to go through the process of you entering in a new person. So you'll enter in their name. It's going to search our database to see if we already have them somewhere in the database. If not, it lets you use, but like I said, it's intuitive. It just follows step by step, and it'll guide you through the next step to fill out. When you're done, you go back to your church leaders list. It'll take you back to that page, and you see you'll see where they are added to that position. Again, this is the part where I recommend not putting an end date unless you specifically know when the end date is there. So that way the next year, if they're serving again, you don't have to change their field or do anything to them. It also helps if you happen to forget at the end of the year to go in and actually change all those end dates, and then it looks like you have no leaders on your church, and we're contacting you and saying, hey, we don't have your church historian or church this person. Well, then that'll save you some headache too of having to worry about that. Like I said, there's a whole section down here where all this is at, church leaders for printing, and contacts. Those are your kind of three areas that pertain to this little section right here, and they're generally more towards the bottom. Church leaders is where we were just at to edit things. Church leaders for printing just makes a printable version of it, because used to we did require you to print that out and send in with your church conference paperwork, but since we're not requiring any paperwork, you don't have to do that part because it's already in our database and already with us, so we don't need you to duplicate that. But it is still there if you need to print it, and I'll show you a picture of that in just a second. The last part you need to worry about is this little contacts list down at the bottom, and that is a way for you to remove someone from the church completely. Now, I mention that because there may be someone who's serving 10 different roles in your church. You don't want to go edit assignment for each individual person, or for that person 10 different times to remove their end date. And I can show you how, if they've decided to leave the church completely, they're not going to serve anymore. When you remove them from the church, it automatically assigns an end date to that day specifically, and then removes them completely as an end. So we'll show you that, but I forget which is the next. Okay, yeah, it is contact. So when you go to contact, you see everybody that is assigned and has been assigned. So it's not just people who are currently assigned to your church. This would also include people who served in the past in a role, but may not be a leader at this moment, but they're still listed in here. And so there's a couple of things you can do. If you need to edit their contact information, this is where you do it, contacts. You'll go to edit, and then it will give you the option to go in here and change their contact information. Now, let's say this person right here has decided that they are leaving the church, they're going somewhere new, or they're not going to go to church anymore, whatever, they're not going to serve in this role, but they're serving like 10 different positions right now. Again, you don't want to go in and click edit assignment and put an end date for each one. You can just click remove from my church, and it automatically removes them and puts the end date as that current moment that you ended it, and then removes them from your church. Now, you can add them later if they decide to come back, but at least it's a quick way to do that. Yes, sir?
Is there an opportunity to upload a photo?
You know, I don't know, actually, because I know we do that with all the clergy programs. There is a section, I'm just not sure if it's in the church. I don't know. Do you know if it's in there?
I don't know if it relates. I know it's there for clergy. I just don't know if it is there for laity.
Right. Yeah. I'm not sure. We'll have to check on that. I can't remember. Okay. This is just really briefly. I just want to show you this. This is just a way that you can print it out if you would like for your own information. You can also, if you want to get really crafty and add a bunch of future leaders, like, people, if you're getting a whole new class for the next year and everybody's changing, you can actually go ahead and do that today. You could, and set their start date to not starting until 1/1/2020. However, they're not going to show up in your contact in that church leaders list because they're not currently a leader. So if you want to see who's listed in that, you just come here to church leaders for printing, and then you'll click this button right here, future leaders. And then it pulls everybody that's going to start at a later date. And so you can see who you've got in there for your records. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about church leaders before we move to clergy compensation?
This is not leaders, but where you have to list people that are going to be permanently removed from roles, and all that 3 year stuff. Is that still part of?
Yes, it is, and I put it on the. It's on the. Well, the only one that was on the checklist from 2018 was the removed from roles. I looked for the other ones that Amy had talked about, Amy Johnson, and they weren't on the checklist. So I need to find out if I need to add those, but they are on the checklist part.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so clergy compensation, this will actually be fairly brief because we're not changing that much from what this past current clergy compensation was. It's the same system. You're going to go to, and I'm in the people dashboard right now, but you may want to do this in the clergy dashboard, especially if you're the secretary. So either way, when you're in the church or the people dashboard, you're going to see a little section that says clergy compensation. Now, if you are in the people dashboard or the clergy dashboard, you're only going to see the compensation that relates to that person that you're signed in as, is that clergy. If you're in the church dashboard, you're going to see a list of everybody who is appointed to your church, and then you'll see their compensation report information. That's another reason why we very strongly recommend not just throwing that username and password out to anybody, because it does show all the clergy compensation information. If you're just handing that username and password out to the church dashboard, they then have access to see all their compensation reports. The church dashboard does not show historical. It only shows current year, but that could still be bad if you don't want that information to go out.
Can you only submit that form within the people dashboard? Not, you can see it in the church dashboard, but not submit it there?
You can submit it there as well.
You can submit it both places?
Correct, yes. Yeah.
And if anybody has a problem logging in, a lot of people sometimes think that their clergy dashboard and their church dashboard have the same login information. They don't. Just call me, and I can't see what your password is, but I can reset it. So if you're having a problem getting into either one of those, we'll reset it for you.
Yeah.
So when you're submitting the clergy compensation, we can do it through the people dashboard.
You can do it through either one, church or people, or church or clergy.
Or clergy.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But we wouldn't have to get their information if they wanted to keep that separate.
Correct.
That's just basically for their information, right?
That is correct. Yes. So that, yeah, especially if you've got a church that's got multiple clergy, you don't want to get their username and password for each one. You can do all that from your church dashboard, and it's going to list each one, and you just fill them out one at a time.
Thank you.
So if you go here, whenever we're ready for 2020, it's not ready yet, so please don't go in there and fill it out. You can start the compensation worksheet, but it's going to have 2019 numbers, so it's going to be off. But what you would do is you would click Start Compensation Worksheet. And what that's going to do is that is going to lead you to our clergy compensation worksheet, which again is the exact same as it was this past year, except for one change. It pulls the clergy status and the service time automatically, and this is a confusing part for some people. It always starts at 1 quarter. So if you pull it up, don't freak out and think, oh, why is this person at 1 quarter? They're definitely full-time. That status is associated with the amount of compensation, the total amount compensation. So, and it's based on a bracket, so once they hit a certain amount, they go up to 1/2. Once they hit another amount, they go up to 3/4, and once they go up to another, it's full-time. That could be different than what you classify your person as at the church. What we classify them as and what you classify them as could be two separate things. So if you call your person full-time, but they don't make the salary amount that fills our full-time, it's going to be different. So this field, this service time, is auto-populated by the amount of compensation that is entered into that field right there.
And we have those minimum compensation levels. If any of y'all want that, just send me an email and I can shoot that out to what the minimum.
Yeah, and we put that on the calculator this year, so we might include that right there at the service field. That way they can just click and see what those
Awesome.
because we did that for the mid-year compensation changes. Okay. And then you just go in and fill it out. It's going to automatically pull in all the churches that they're associated with. So if they're at a multi-point charge, it'll list them all, and then you just go through and fill it out. If there's an error, it's going to be in red right here. And so like when you fill it out and they're eligible for health benefits, the health benefits doesn't show up unless they're at least of a certain service time. Same thing for pension. And so that's why it went from 1 to 3 for any of you OCD people in here. It did skip from 1 to 3 because number 2 is health. And so once you fill in a certain amount, it'll pop up automatically. And then if you don't fill in, it'll tell you, then you make your selections, and it'll tell you how much you have to fill in total church, and then you divide it up by church. Most of this should be fairly the same. We've done this for years. This part's not changing. The part that is changing is, and I want to just show you this, once you go to Start Compensation Worksheet, it is not attached to our form system. This is a custom coded thing that I've done on my own completely, and so I've custom wrote this, and so it does have the ability to save, and so at the very bottom it does have that little save button, and so when you do save it, it'll take you back to this form, or this page, and right now it'll then pop up, say edit, so you can make an edit, and then 2019 report for viewing, so that way you can have it if you need to print it out. I did add this little section. This will look different. I'm open to adding different things if you think something else might be beneficial. The reason for that is we noticed that the system, I made a mistake in writing the system and would only allow for 1 per year. And so I didn't take into account the fact that some people move in July. And so I've had to rework it so that way you can add a separate form for those people if they're moving and need to fill out a new clergy compensation report. So now what you would do is you would hit this button right here, July 1 appointment change, and that can be any appointment change, doesn't have to be July 1. And it'll open up a new clergy compensation report. But what it's not going to do, because we wanted to keep the historical record, is it's not going to remove this one. It's just going to put it on top of it. And that way there'll be multiple. So I tried to find a way to kind of think of a way to, the best way for you to be able to distinguish between which is which. And I thought the best way might be to put the salary and the effective start date, because you have the ability to change the effective start date. So if they're starting July 1, you'll put July 1 at the top as their start date. So like I said, I'm open to other things if you think it would be more beneficial, because you guys are going to be using this the most.
But typically, when you go in for your church conference, you're going to be starting on January 1. That's the date.
Correct, right. So, and it will automatically do that. You won't need to, right now it automatically sets to January 1, 2019. And then so when we start this, and I should also add that all of this is going to go live, or the goal is to go live September 1st. So that's when all your forms will be ready, clergy compensation numbers will be updated. Yeah, that's the goal, September 1st. Now, if September 1st comes around and it doesn't happen, and you're like calling me and be like, Chris, where is this? I'm be like,
it'll be like every other year.
yeah, I guess, probably. Okay, so, all right.
We're gonna have health insurance benefits by September 1st.
Supposed to.
Good luck.
Yeah.
So my goal is September 1st. We'll see how that goes. Okay, so what's new this year is we had to take into account how we were going to do signatures. Now, this is a good point to your question, is how this is very similar to how it will also be in the forms. So we are still requiring 3 kind of people to look at it. We're calling this more consent rather than signatures. And so this is saying when you click this submitted, ready for review, and if you remember, when you fill out the form, you're allowed to save it as many times as you want. But when you're ready to submit it, to go to the district office for them to kind of do their thing, you have to press this submitted, ready for review button. When you do that, it goes through and checks and makes sure all your things are good and you filled out everything correctly. And then it also immediately makes these 4 sections required. The first one is saying that we affirm and digitally sign that the above clergy compensation is correct and will be used by the benefits administrator for pension and health billing. This is your digital signature. This is you saying that each one of these people have looked at the form and say that it's okay. So that way when the treasurer calls in a few weeks and says, this number is not correct, and Dale Bryant goes, well, this is what you agreed to, and he says, no, we're going to pull it up. And same thing with the signature, say, well, it was consented that your name was written down, so who wrote your name without your consent? So just make sure that this is important, that each one of these people actually looks at the clergy compensation report and approves it. And then you can click the button and write their names. These are all required fields, and they will not let you submit the form without them being filled out. Yeah, that'll be fine. Okay, cool. So is he coming over now? Okay, whenever he comes in, I'll stop. I'm almost done, actually. So that's the only difference that's really the only difference in clergy compensation is now it's there. Again, you don't have to print it out. You will notice that district superintendent's signature is missing, and that's because we moved that to the back end on the digital, on the back end side for the districts. So what Ravonda will do is once you click submitted, ready for review, she'll get a notification. She'll send it to David, and David will take a look at it. And if he approves it, then she'll go in and approve it. And when she approves it, that's their signature as approving. They're still looking at it and everything, but it's not the same as actually getting their signature like it used to require. Yes.
One question of in some circumstances, a elder who is not the district superintendent will be presiding in a church conference.
You're right.
And so will they need to sign a form, and if so, where?
That is a great point.
In relation to clergy compensation or any of the church conference forms?
In regard to the church conference in general.
Yeah, so if there was that section, like there was that signature presiding elder, then that still is in there. So what you would do is if when you're at the church conference and they give their approval, then somebody would need to go in and click the button and write their name, but they would still need to give an approval. We'll just talk about assessments real fast. There's really not too much to talk about other than assessments. This last year was a process of, it was actually the form bite system where you would go in and you would fill out the form bite, but what you did at the end was you uploaded the documents into the form bite. And that's what we did this previous year. We're not doing that this year. This year it is the same with the charge conference forms. Everything is going to be completely online. So we filled out all of the forms right now. And so this is just an example of one of the forms. And so they're each going to be, and I'm working with Amy today about how we're going to divide those out and make sure that the right people gets the right form at the right time and different things like that. But all I can really say is that way you know it's on your radar that the assessments are going to be completely online, no uploading, downloading, anything like that. And you'll access them from the same location, the dashboard, depending on whether it's attached to your clergy or whether it's the church filling it out or things like that. It will be in different places. And like I said, I'm working with Amy to figure out where we're going to place it.
And this will also be savable to come back to.
Correct. It's the same system as the charge conference forms. So as you fill them out, you can save them, submit them, and then when you're finished, it'll take you to that officially submit. It's the exact same process. One thing I'm really trying to do is make sure that all of our systems are, for the most part, similar. So that way, as we go through each one, once you get the hang of filling out a form bite, now you know how to fill out the rest of them. So it's not a different process for every different thing. So that's really, like I said, if you're driving home and you think of something, email Ravonda. We'll figure it out. And thank you so much.